Okay, I skipped this important part from the beginning because I think it's more useful to talk about this idea in connection with the end of the poem. So, John Agard writes, bandage up me eye to me own history, blind me to me own identity. Taking those lines, just highlight or mentally circle which words or images do you think really represent the oppression of powerful institutions, the way that powerful institutions have oppressed, limited, erased John Agard's personal history and the cultural history of Jamaica, the Caribbean, Black history, Black cultural icons. You should have drawn your attention to bandage and blind. Now, a bandage is something that is used to cover an injury. And to be blinded is again an injury that happens to the eye. So if the eye cannot receive light, if there is damage to the nerves in the eye, etc., if there's something wrong with the organ of the eye and it cannot see, the person has been blinded. Okay, so we can connect these words to an injury. And for some people, blinding is something that happens from birth. It is a natural state of being due to an injury or to do with the formation of the eye. Now, blind is a really interesting image to use, therefore, because if you can be blind from birth, if it is something that can happen to you from day one, then that suggests that this being blinded to his own identity is something that he thinks has or could have possibly been there his whole life. And we know that because of the colonial past and because of the Eurocentric way that the education system has run for so long, because of the hiding of documents, because of the falsified reports and things like that, we do know that really this history and this identity has been something that has been erased or hidden from like the global light. So blinding and bandages represents the idea of injury. And if we think of an injury, we think of pain, don't we? Suffering. And within an injury, after it has happened, there is the pain of the injury, and then there is the pain afterwards, the kind of fear that comes with that. Really silly example, but I was walking down a really busy road near me, and a bit of the road got into my eye, so it like flicked up from a car and it cut my eye, and I couldn't open my eye, and I had to go to hospital, and they said if it had got just a tiny bit to the side, it would have taken my eyesight. It was absolutely fine, and my eyesight is fine now. But since then, I've become much more cautious when I'm on a busy road or if it's really windy, because I am genuinely now like aware that my eyes are really like, it's really easy for something bad to happen to your eyes. They're a very sensitive organ. And so what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way is that there is the pain of the incident, and then there is the fear and the kind of suffering that comes after the incident. Now, when this is a big thing, not a small thing like mine, when this is a big thing, when this is an injury that you keep coming back to or experiencing, then we describe that as trauma. And a trauma response. So, for example, if since you were born you feel that school does not reflect the same history that you see in your family, the same history that you see in your own identity, if you feel that school doesn't reflect that time after time, that same message is being presented, then that would be a trauma response. That would be an example of you thinking, oh, again? And that idea of, oh, I'm having to feel this pain again? And it might lead you to be quite angry that history has been bandaged up. Because a bandage is something that we can remove. It says, bandage up my eye to my own history, blind me to my own identity. This injury has happened. There is a cause of it. And the cause is that Eurocentric education system, colonialism, that powerful system. They've done the bandage and the blinding. So, if a bandage and a blind is a powerful injury, and it is Because of it, something is erased. You can no longer see. It represents metaphorically the erasure and ignorance from the Eurocentric education system, from colonial history, from white European history. The erasure and ignorance towards Black history. And I was teaching this a while ago, and someone said this really great thing I'm going to teach you. They said, Miss, could this image of blind also represent the idea of a blind eye? If you turn a blind eye to something, you choose to ignore it as a choice. So there is accidental ignorance of, well, I've never experienced that before, so I was never supposed to know. There's accidental ignorance of, I don't know, I've never eaten with a knife and fork. I didn't know I had to eat this with a knife and fork. I apologise. If you want me to eat with a knife and fork, I'll eat with a knife and fork. I would usually use my hands. That's fine. Yeah, that's just differences. That's accidental. If this is a blind eye, you're purposely choosing not to pay attention. You're not choosing not to understand or to know. And this idea of turning a blind eye to someone's history, that's what we call racist ignorance. If you turn a blind eye to someone's culture, to someone's kind of history, to someone's heritage, that's then racist ignorance. Because you're choosing not to know. You're choosing not to learn. You're choosing not to involve yourself in a part of the world. And it's a really clever use of the word, because the image of blind can represent the idea of an injury, the idea of pain and suffering, the idea of maybe trauma and lasting suffering. But also this idea of a blind eye, a purposeful choice to erase and ignore. And when that is linked to prejudice or to race, we know that that is racist. And so through these images, we see the kind of impact of this powerful institution. And this powerful institution is almost set up like an enemy that is attacking the individual. So while the previous, or while the other powerful people in this poem, you've got the powerful institutions, then you've got powerful people. Those powerful people bring hope, light, warmth. Toussaint Louverture, Nanny de Maroon, Mary Seacole illuminate us, empower. Whereas the powerful institutions, they are almost an enemy that attacks, that imprisons, that limits, that erases and ignores. After we have had these powerful histories of Toussaint Louverture, Nanny de Maroon, Mary Seacole, we then see this image of him carving and checking out his own history and identity. And the image of carving is really interesting, okay? Because to carve something means to make a permanent mark. It means to drive into something and uncover it permanently. If you carve something, you make a message that lasts. If he is carving his own history, he is making a message that lasts. If he is checking out his own history, he is checking out and keeping and learning his own history. And this idea of carving, if we take that, these images I told you before, if we have that powerful institution that seems like an impenetrable, unstoppable, unavoidable enemy, then he is saying we as individuals have the power to carve into that system. Like Toussaint Louverture, like Nanny de Maroon, individuals have the power to rebel, to challenge, to disrupt. And this act of carving is symbolic of that action that we all, as individuals, can do. This is a poem about rebellion, challenge, and disruption to oppressive systems. And John Agard is saying that all humans have the power to rebel, to spread light, hope, warmth, and guidance instead of silence, ignorance, oppression.